Marcus Aurelius said, "What we do in life echoes through eternity." What is your life echoing through eternity? Welcome to Echoes Through Eternity with Dr. Jeffrey Skinner. Our mission is to inspire, engage, and encourage leaders from across the globe to plant missional churches and be servant leaders. So join us and hear the stories of servant leaders reverberating lives as God echoes them through eternity. Brought to you by Missional Church Planting and Leadership Development and Dynamic Church Planting International.
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of Echoes Through Eternity. We are so excited to have you here today. This week, we will continue our discussion on the 8 critical systems for a healthy church. Whether it be a church plant, whether it be a church in need of revitalization, or whether it be an existing church, if these systems are not healthy, your church is not going to be healthy. Or if it is healthy and one of these systems is broken, it will not take long for your church to become unhealthy. So we're going to take a quick break here just to get started, and then we'll be right back.
In a building, on a hill, in your home, on a beach, in real life, and online. Multitudes are coming to Christ around the world, but there's a shortage of healthy churches. On every continent of the world, Christians like you have learned exactly how to start a church with DCPI's free, step-by-step training based on God's Word to equip you to reach your community with the good news of Jesus Christ. Dynamic Church Planting International wants to come alongside you or your organization for free. No strings attached, no hidden cost, no subscriptions. We equip you absolutely free. Our mission is to equip servant leaders to plant 5 million churches. Go to dcpi.org for more details. That's dcpi.org.
All right, welcome back to Echoes Through Eternity. Today's system is the ministry placement system. And the idea here is just people need to be involved in your church. If they're not involved, they'll simply become consumers. And when our churches become buffets, as soon as they have their fill or as soon as they get bored with our selection, they're going to move on down the road to the next selection. Maybe they get tired of prime rib on your buffet and they move on down the road and they want some barbecue in their buffet. Or maybe they get tired of the barbecue in the buffet and they move on down the road for the breakfast buffet. And I use that as an analogy because that's essentially what we're doing when we just encourage people to kind of come and sit and consume our services there, whether it be a program, be a children's program, or worship music, or preaching. We don't want disciples to be consumers. Sure, we want to feed them, so to speak, but part of being fed is to get energy in order to go and feed other people, right? And so we equip them, we gather the people, and we equip them, and then they go out into the community and they begin to teach and preach and to love on the rest of the community there. And then hopefully people see something in them that they want. They see their lives thriving. They see them loving on them and being cared for. And then they bring those people back to the church and we get equipped. And so it becomes a cycle of equipping and sending, equipping and sending. And the ministry placement system is a place where they learn to, it's a comprehensive system for inviting, observing, orienting, scheduling, equipping, developing, and celebrating the volunteers of the church, but also a place for once the people come in, their first-time guests, this is a part of the assimilation system. So their first-time guest, a second-time guest, a third-time guest, by the time they've been there the third or fourth time, they're looking to become involved in the church, or at least need a place to become involved in the church. And so the ministry placement system then becomes that place in the assimilation system where we move them from a first-time guest all the way through being discipled. And now part of disciple is a place to serve. I encourage you, if you haven't already, invite some friends to listen to this along with you. Take some notes. They don't even have to be in the same location. That's the beauty of podcasting, is that friends can listen wherever they are and jot some notes on their lunchtime. And then you guys get back together and work as a team to begin to develop an implementation plan for how you're going to utilize a ministry placement system in your context there. Just want to remind you that all of this stuff is a part of the New Church Dynamics teaching from DCPI. This is not stuff that I developed on my own, but as a master trainer, as a senior master trainer at DCPI, I'm authorized to teach this, and that's essentially what I'm doing here. I will add my own input. I have my own content that I add with this and create for this, but the core of it is part of that DCPI teaching there. If you'd like to be a part of that teaching, I encourage you to go to missionalleadershipcoaching.com. You can fill out an application for training there, and we'd love to evaluate your application. And then if accepted, then we'll invite you to be a participant in the training that we have that's online through a coach. And you'll be engaging with a coach once a week along with a cohort where you have opportunity to discuss this stuff. So anyway, that's missionalleadershipcoaching.com. Or you can also go to dcpi.org and see all the training tracks that we have. We have church planting essentials, churches planting churches. And again, this is part of the new church development system. So let's go ahead and get started in our training here today. So our first principle here, when we're talking about the ministry placement system, is that people grow and the church grows the most quickly by inviting the right people into the right ministries at the right time, the right seasons. Now, what do we mean by the right people, the right time, in the right ministries, and the right reasons, and the right seasons? What do we mean by that? Well, if I don't have a passion for children, you probably don't want to put me in the children's ministry. If I don't have a passion for outreach, and if I'm typically kind of introverted, I'm probably not going to be someone who's good evangelistically for reaching out and going out and meeting new people. It's not to say I can't, but typically they don't have an interest in that type of stuff. So wherever the gifts are for that individual, that determines where you want them in the right ministry there and the right time. What do we mean by the right time? Well, if someone is, we all have seasons. We have seasons where we tend to need to be fed. We have seasons where we tend to need to equip and feed others. We have seasons where we just kind of need rest. And I've been in a season in the last 3 years where I need a little bit of rest. So we find the people that are in the right season, in the right place, and place them in the right ministry. And that helps them be a success. If they don't have a gift for that ministry, they're probably not going to enjoy it, and they may not be successful in that. Kind of the scriptural basis for this, 1 Corinthians 12:7. Now to each one, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. That's 1 Peter 10:11. For just as each of us has one body with members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. We all have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If your gift is prophesying, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. If it is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, then teach. If it is encourage. If it is giving, then give generously. If it is to lead, then do it diligently. If it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. That's Romans 12:4-8. Here's some questions to discuss with your team. How important are spiritual gifts in the life of a healthy church? Why do you think that is? What percentage of Christians in your church do you know what their spiritual gifts are? How many do you think use them? How do new churches help people develop spiritual gifts? I believe that every believer should be serving in their local church based on the Bible's teaching about spiritual gifts. Peter says that everyone's spiritual gifts should be used to serve others. This is a means of imparting God's grace to people, 1 Peter 4:10. Paul lists 7 different spiritual gifts. Concerning each, it says, let him use it according to the grace given him, and let him use it in proportion to his faith, Romans 12:6. So God's design for the church is that it be led by leaders, taught by teachers, administered by administrators, etc. Now, I've told you we base our teachings here at DCPI. We base our teachings on 12 biblical principles. This biblical principle is principle number 5, the team leadership principle. And it says that the church planter, pastor, is most effective as part of a team on which he serves as a visionary leader. Now, I'll add to that, it's not just the church planting pastor, it's any pastor, whether it be the church revitalization pastor, the planting pastor, or just a pastor of an existing church. They need to be part of a team. Let me give you a couple of ideas on how we can enlist volunteers. 1, list ministry needs and share that list with your people. You might publish it in a bulletin. It might be a list of serving opportunities on spiritual gifts. I think I told you last time that I've seen a ministry fair or a small group fair. But kind of like you have job fairs in the church, you have a ministry fair where all the various ministries and the leaders set up a table in the foyer or somewhere else within the church, within Sunday school rooms, and you invite people in on kind of a tour to find out where they can be involved. Perhaps this is the culmination of your assimilation training. Perhaps it's the culmination of a discipleship class or the culmination of a membership class where they get an opportunity to kind of see what the ministries of the church are and meet the leaders of those various ministries there. Preach a series of messages about serving and spiritual gifts. Invite people to sign up for a ministry that appeals to them. Offer a class about spiritual gifts. Empower every current volunteer to invite new volunteers for their team. Invite a friend along to help serve alongside, help build relationship, but it also mentors them in that process of whatever it is that they're doing, whatever team they're doing, it mentors them. If they're on a building team, then it mentors them in the process of building. Before all special events, list all the positions that the church needs to help guests experience God. If you're having a banquet, make sure that you plug what's needed from that banquet. Another thing is to follow an invite process. Pray. That's always important. Jesus said in Luke 10:2, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Your first prayer should be, Lord, who should I invite to serve in this particular area? Before you approach someone about serving, ask God to prepare their heart and purify their motives and purify your motives. We don't want to just fill a position because it's available. Your invitation should be based on a desire to see people find a fulfilling role in your church. You're inviting them to fulfill God's agenda and purpose in their lives, not your own. Look for people to invite to a specific need. Identify a need, then pray. Look for the right person to invite and meet that need. The right person serving in the right place in the right way at the right time. I got another discussion question for you here. How might you recognize that someone is interested in meeting a particular need? And I'll give you a few answers after this. So a couple of answers I think are good answers would be look for people who aren't serving. Look for people who don't have a role. One of the things that we do in ministry is we just overload people. We find a willing volunteer and we'll give them 4 different ministries or just overload them with tasks. Don't do that. People are better when they're focused on one particular area and they can develop that area. One of the reasons we have such a difficulty with finding leaders is, number one, they feel like they're in that position forever. So give them permission to make it a short-term commitment, 6 months or a year. And that helps you out because if they get into that position or that role and it doesn't work for them, you have permission to reevaluate that in 6 months or a year, especially if they're newer to the congregation. Maybe make that a 30-day commitment or a 90-day commitment to allow them to see how they're going to fit in that role and fit with the rest of the people that are on that team there. See how their leadership style is. If they're more of a directing leader, they probably aren't going to get along with people who don't like to be micromanaged. Another answer is just to ask them. Invite them to join an appropriate team. Cast a vision. Find out, emphasize the benefits of their service, how their ministry will benefit the recipients of it, how their ministry will benefit the whole church, how the ministry will benefit them, how it's going to delight God, and how it will benefit you as the leader. Offer them an opportunity to observe, kind of shadow another leader. That's another great thing to do. Help them to allow them to just kind of sit in, let's say it's a children's department. So just invite them, hey, I need an extra set of eyes in here this week. Could you just step into the children's department for this week and just kind of observe and kind of help a little bit? That gives them an opportunity to kind of see the ministry up close and personal without making a commitment. And then be sure they connect. Be sure they have a good time when they check it out. Once you've invited a range for the potential volunteer to accompany one of the most enthusiastic and best members of the particular ministry team. And then debrief their experience within 48 hours. Find out how they think it went. Give the new volunteer permission to just do that short-term commitment. Initially, it may just be, hey, hang out for a couple of weeks and see how you like it. And then, hey, 90-day commitment, and then maybe a 1-year commitment. So allow them to kind of gradually ease into it instead of thinking, hey, I am committed to this for a lifetime. Again, that's one of the things that a church struggles with is lifetime commitments in a particular ministry role. We all love the blue-haired Sunday school teacher that's been teaching for 75 years. When she started, she was 12 years old teaching Sunday school, and has been teaching that same class since she was 12 years old. But the reality, today's culture and today's environment, it's not realistic to find someone who's going to keep a job for 2 or 3 years, much less a volunteer role for 2 or 3 years. And of course, safety is premier. You have got to do background checks on people. I think every denomination that is out there, even in independent denominations, everybody does background checks on their workers. If you're not doing background checks on your workers, you are putting your children, you're putting even your volunteers at serious risk. So you have got to do background checks on people. It's not an offensive thing. It's just a safety thing. And most of your volunteers, if not all, are not going to question a background check when they're volunteering with youth and children, anyone under 18. Additional safety measures, making sure that there's at least 2 volunteers in a room at the same time. No closed doors, or if there are closed doors, be sure there's a window so parents and other people can see as they're looking in there. Even as a pastor, I don't meet with people, or especially the opposite sex, behind closed doors. There's always a room. There's always someone else in the room with me. If I'm meeting with the opposite sex, it's in public. Yeah, you just can't be too safe these days, unfortunately. Finally, you want to develop a ministry growth path for people. As the church grows, it's central that teams also grow. So you want to develop kind of a ministry path here for people so they can volunteer maybe one time, as I was telling you before. And then maybe it's just every week or every 2 weeks. And then eventually they may grow into being the full leader of their own ministry there. And I always encourage leaders to encourage people that if they see a need within a church, tell me. Come to the staff and talk to us. Let a staff member know, or someone else in the church know, the pastor know. And say, hey, I see this as a need within our church that's not being met. I would love to volunteer for that ministry role. Encourage this within your church, because that's another way to find leaders. They may not fit within a particular ministry, but have a passion for another ministry. Maybe they're creative. Maybe they want to have an artist ministry, or a painting ministry, or a photography ministry. Encourage them to start that ministry if they come to you and they notice a need. Chances are God has laid it on their heart to lead that ministry. Again, the right person, right time. So when it comes to equipping and training the people, I think there's kind of 3 phases to the training. My wife is a teacher, and she taught me a method many years ago that they call the gradual release method. It works well with students, and I think it works equally well with adults. And that just says that I do, you watch, and then you do, and I watch, and then you do. You may have a better method for training, and if you do, use that. There is nothing prescriptive about what we're suggesting here, or what I'm suggesting. This is your ministry, and you do things the way you feel like they need to be done. And then continue on the job training. That don't just train them and forget about them. Continued staff development. As you come across new resources, probably every 6 months, at least once a year, have an in-service for your church leaders. Take them to outside conferences. Pay for that. Pay for their expenses to do that stuff, because that keeps your ministry fresh. It's only going to benefit your ministry by sending them to bigger church and other events where they can be equipped with new skills and new ideas. So I offer a few guidelines for ministry placement. Some of these we've already covered. For example, I told you that I believe that churches grow best when people serve according to their spiritual gifts. And then I believe that people want to serve in an area that interests them. If they have no interest in children, if children irritate them, they probably aren't a good fit for children's ministry. If they have no interest in evangelism, they probably don't fit well in the outreach system. They don't fit well for the outreach ministry there. People want to serve with people they enjoy. Relationships, especially today in today's culture, relationships trump almost everything. I was coaching a leader just today, and I told him, I said, people forgive a multitude of sins if they believe in a person's heart, because relationship today trumps almost everything, including competence. They'll put up with a mediocre pastor if they believe he has a heart, if they love his heart. They will tolerate mediocre worship if they love the people on the worship team, or if they have a relationship with other people in the church there. Relationships are key to almost everything within the church there. Every servant deserves to be celebrated. If you just work your people to death without celebrating them, you're going to burn people out really quick. A person's interest may change over time. Encourage them to try and change other ministries there. And then one of the dangers that I need you to pay attention to is that when a person drops out of a ministry, they might be in danger of dropping out of the church. Regularly check with former volunteers to see how they're doing. Ask if they're ready to serve with the team again. Don't just forget about them, because then they feel like a tool. They feel like they were just used. Well, I only have interest in you as long as you're serving. But when you stop serving, I stop paying attention to you. I stop caring for you. That is the last thing that you want to communicate to your people, which is, again, a reason why your pastor needs to be a part of a team. He needs, or she needs, to have a good team around him or her so that he can practice caring for the flock and follow up with some of these people. Make sure your leaders are communicating to you as a pastor. If someone drops out and the pastor doesn't know, that's a real bad thing. The pastor needs to know when people drop out so he or she can follow up to be sure everything's okay. It may just be that someone needs a break, and that's perfectly fine. But it also might mean that they get their feelings hurt for some reason. That's not good. So here's a few questions to discuss among yourselves if you got your team with you. Otherwise, you can just ponder them to yourself. Get your notepad and write these down. Ask yourself, what do you like about this system? What elements would you like to adapt to your church? What parts of your ministry placement system need the most help? And then how will you develop ministry placement system in your own church as it grows? According to the Pareto principle, 20% of the people will do 80% of the work. Therefore, the simplest means to grow a church is to increase its number of 20% doers. Every leader enables the church to care for 4 followers. For our church to reach 100, it must have 20 leaders. For our church to reach 1,000, it must have 200 leaders. Keep that in mind as you evaluate your systems. Keep that in mind as you prepare, as you develop your systems here. Keep that in mind. And it takes some time to reflect. What parts of the system have you heard about that you would like to adapt and implement? What pieces of your ministry placement system will you upgrade the next quarter or the next year? And then finally, how can you help your daughter churches develop an effective ministry placement system as well? Remember that reproductive system is always at the forefront of our minds. How are we going to reproduce our leaders? How are we going to reproduce our church? And then how are we going to continue to equip our leaders even after we've placed them? How are we going to continue to equip our daughter churches after we have launched them? Well, it's been great having you here today. I am so happy you came to listen to us. Please like and subscribe. Share this with your friends. We'll be doing some interviews over the coming weeks here. Next week, we're going to talk about our financial system, which is an extremely important part of the system. Church systems, they're one of the 8 critical systems. And this is other people's money that you're dealing with. Never take that for granted. And then we just have a couple more after that, and we'll be done. In the meantime, like I said, please like and subscribe and share this with your friends, and we'll talk with you again next week. Bye-bye.
Only I can make a change. Slowly take a step today. I will never be the same, 'cause that's what it takes.